Good evening. I'm Killian. I'm your moderator tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight for the first Town Hall Tuesday, where discussions with citywide experts and innovators explore the most pressing urban sustainable issues with the goal to move Chicago into a sustainable future. The Town Hall series includes waste, housing, water, and transportation. If you think you can bring something to the table and want to share in one of the future series, contact us. Town Hall Tuesdays are organized with 6018 North and supported by a COVID response grant from the Environmental Law and Policy. We are Edgewater Environmental Coalition, 100% volunteer-driven group of individuals, businesses, and political officials bringing an urban green voice to local challenges through action, organizing, education, and advocacy. Previously known as Edgewater Environmental Sustainability Project, EEC begins 2021 with a new name, mission, vision, and logo. We are going on 11th year. We have monthly meetings. We're open to the public. Our tech team will be sharing links to our webpage and social media. Join us. You can see tonight's list of tonight's guest next to me. This is an interactive town hall. The guests will be sharing all their links and other info they feel is relevant to our audience. After they speak, we will then have a roundtable where they can talk to each other. Then we open it to the audience. But during the whole time, the speakers and audience can talk to each other through the chat room. This is not about recycling education or how or where to recycle. This is to show the new way to look at waste diversion. EEC has educated the community since January 2018, when it was discovered that American municipalities were not recycling, rather they were shipping material offshore to Asian countries. And when China said no more, that created a plastic bubble we continue to float in. The city has tried every which way to recycle, but in the 25 years, it has not proven productive. So recycle needs to make room for other tools, reuse, repurpose, and composting, to name a few. It's about landfill diversion. And if there is recycling, there must be an end user. We believe it's time for transparency from the city and waste haulers to let the public and consumers know where the recycled products are going and who is the end user. We would also like to see the city update their environmental page from 2015 and the previous administration to the current 2021. It would send a message that the city is looking forward with its waste management, not stagnating from 7 years ago. So let's begin. Ask, where are we now as a city on waste management goals? What can we do in 2021? And what and how can we plan for the long term? Our first speaker will be Megan Walton, Delta Institute, Chicago, City of Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Killian, for that introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I am going to be sharing about the soon to, oh, can everyone see my screen? Sorry about that. Is my screen coming through okay? Trisha, can you give me a thumbs up if it is?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. I'm excited to be sharing with you all today the soon to come City of Chicago waste strategy. A little bit about me. My name is Megan Conway and I am with Delta Institute. Delta is a nonprofit based in Chicago that works throughout the Midwest on a pretty broad variety of environmental initiatives. One of those initiatives for the 20 years that Delta has been around has been waste reduction. And our work, and primarily my work at Delta, takes three kind of distinct forms when it comes to waste reduction. One of those is waste planning and strategy. We have helped Cook County put together their solid waste management plan updates the past 2 iterations. And we are currently working with the City of Chicago, Mayor's Office, and Department of Streets and Sanitation to help them develop a holistic waste strategy for the city, which I'll be talking about today. Our work also we work with food scraps at the pilot scale. We've worked at the Field Museum and I saw Carter jump on, so glad to hear him talk later on. And we've also worked with municipalities like Lansing and implementing pilot programs for food scrap diversion from restaurants and food processing businesses. And finally, for as long as we've been around, Delta has been really focused on building materials and deconstruction and trying to salvage materials rather than have them end up in landfills. Delta developed Rebuilding Exchange, which is in Lincoln Park neighborhood a little over 10 years ago. And we've worked more recently with the EPA and with St. Louis in deconstruction and C&D recycling projects. So today, in talking about our work with the City of Chicago, I wanted to give a general overview of the work and what's been done so far. The overall goal is to develop a strategy to overhaul the city's materials management with the goals of reducing waste, increasing diversion, and reviewing where in the waste stream there are opportunities for economic benefit. And this started in July. It's a pretty fast and furious initiative that will be only the first step moving into many phases of implementation for these strategies with many partners and hopefully lots of momentum moving forward. But in July of 2020, we kicked off the project and established city priorities. Throughout the summer and into the fall was really focused on the current conditions assessment, what's happening now in the city, data collection, stakeholder engagement, both internal with city departments and external with many of you that are on this call, and a peer city review of looking at what has worked really well in other cities throughout the country. The phase we are in now is developing the strategy and updating the waste characterization data for the city. Most recent data we have is from over 10 years ago, a fantastic study that CDM Smith put together, but we are working currently with UIC to get that more up to date to help inform the strategies that we'll be developing. And this is way too much information for one slide. I apologize for that, but I wanted to give a sense of what to expect when this strategy does come out in about 5 weeks. So in that existing conditions, what we've looked at is the waste characterization and generation updated for 2020 and 2021, the existing services around waste that are available to Chicago residents, how different city departments interact with the waste system, especially since the dissolution of the Department of Environment, environmental, economic, and public health and environmental justice impacts of our current waste system, some global context of COVID-19 and international commodity markets, existing policies, existing plans, and stakeholders currently in the Chicago waste system. And then our strategies that we'll be developing will have guiding principles that I'll be walking through in just a moment and are split into the specific categories below. So source reduction includes repair, reuse, reduction, anything to keep materials from entering any sort of waste stream. Municipal management and data tracking, residential waste and recycling, both for low density and high density residences in Chicago. ICI, which is industrial, commercial, and institutional waste reduction, organics and wasted food opportunities, specialty materials, including e-waste, household hazardous waste, bulk items, and finally, construction and demolition debris. And the guiding principles I'm really excited to share. These were developed in partnership with the city to act as a North Star for the strategies we're developing under those different categories. This, I hope, will really give a sense of what to expect with the waste strategy that's coming out and the general direction that the city is envisioning for the materials management system moving forward. So there are 6 guiding principles that I'll be going through. I'm trying and failing not to talk a million miles a minute, but I'll be available for any questions at any point after this. So the first principle is to reframe Chicago's materials as resources instead of waste. This is really thinking about deprioritizing incremental improvements to the current disposal system and focusing more on upstream interventions and items near the top of EPA's waste hierarchy to maximize impact. Next, we want to center equity and environmental justice in program design, thinking about both ensuring that new programs and policies don't create an additional burden, and also trying to target benefits, particularly for communities that have historically been burdened with a disproportionate amount of the city's waste infrastructure and the negative public health and economic impacts associated with that. The third principle recognizes that the city is the audience for this waste strategy, but the city as an entity does not have the ability to make the changes needed alone, and partnerships and engagement with organizations and institutions who are already pushing innovations in materials management will be a huge part of this implementation strategy. The fourth principle is to prioritize initiatives with a revenue potential, no or low cost, or positive return on investment when applied at scale. Especially considering the impacts of COVID that we've seen in the last year, it's really important for us to provide realistic strategies that can move forward in a really difficult budgetary reality and prioritize investment where it can have the biggest impact, and rather than making a laundry list of things that are more of a wish list than something that can be actually implemented. The fifth principle is about setting goals and identifying metrics for success, as well as improving data collection both for the city and to share with residents around progress of reaching those goals. And finally, we wanted to highlight the fact that any changes and improvements to the materials management system needs both initial and continuous community engagement and public education in order to be successful. And that is what I have. I think we're taking questions at the end, but I'll be keeping an eye on the chat if there's anything I can sort of answer off the bat while I pass the baton.
Are you ready to move on? And Megan, did I say your name with the married name?
It's Conway, but I'm in
right.
the middle of the marriage name change. It's totally fine, either one. It's
Megan Walton Conway. I practiced that for hours. So the next speaker is Abigail or Abby Sullivan and Justin Gutierrez from the Inspector of General Office regarding the large building recycling initiative inspection report.
All right, let me know when the screen is sharing, if we're good to go.
We can see it.
Great. All right, well, good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Justin Gutierrez, and I'm a performance analyst with the city's Inspector General's office. Presenting with me tonight is my colleague, senior performance analyst, Abby Sullivan. And we're going to be discussing the findings from a recent audit of the Department of Streets and Sanitation's enforcement of recycling requirements. So as to determine whether DSS ensures commercial and high density residential building owners are providing recycling services in accordance with the Chicago Recycling Ordinance. So the Chicago Recycling Ordinance, it applies to all commercial and high density residential buildings. And in its reading, high density residential, the ordinance was really an extension of an existing mandate that required this population of commercial and high density residential buildings to contract privately for their refuse pickup. This ordinance does not apply to the Blue Card program. Those requirements are actually covered under a different ordinance. So the Chicago Recycling Ordinance outlines requirements for both the building owners and the private haulers that they contract. So in terms of building owner requirements, first and foremost, they're required to contract with a private hauler and to have that private hauler provide recycling containers for them. They are also required to post informational signage and really just provide any educational resources that will facilitate their tenants' ability to recycle successfully. As far as private hauler requirements, the private haulers are required to inform their existing refuse customers of their recycling obligations, decline to accept recycling services. They're also required to be providing any kind of educational resources that will help their customers ensure that their tenants are recycling. they're also supposed to maintain records of the source and type of materials that they're hauling, and then take that information and assemble it into an annual report that is shared with the DSS commissioner for their review. So these reports are pretty crucial because, as you can see, in terms of what they capture, we're seeing a lot of information, a lot of data points that would kind of help us to really truly understand what it is we're generating in the city, what is making it to landfills, and what we are being successful in diverting. So based off of this, also the ordinance offers some enforcement capacity to DSS, 30-day fines, or 30-day notices rather, and fines that can range from $500 to $5,000, depending on the frequency of violations. They also, in terms of their relationship with the haulers, if the DSS commissioner reviews their reports and deems them to be insufficient, they can actually reach out to BACP and have that private hauler's business license, their renewal withheld until they are meeting the requirements outlined by the DSS commissioner. So kind of based off of this look into this population of buildings, we found that DSS does not ensure commercial and high density residential building owners are providing recycling services, and that they are not ensuring that haulers submit timely and useful reports. So for a little bit more detail on those findings, I'm going to pass it over to Abby.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So we have two findings in this report. I'm going to run through the findings, our recommendations, and the department's response. So the first finding, we analyzed complaint records from 311, and we interviewed the ward superintendents who are responsible for enforcement of the ordinance. What we found was that the department does not know the population of buildings that would be subject to the terms of the ordinance. These would be the same buildings that are required to contract for private scavenger service, but the department does not know the population. So they do reactive complaint-based enforcement only. Complaints go through the ward offices or through 311. They're captured in Salesforce, which is the 311 system. And then they are routed to the ward superintendents to perform the inspections. There is no consistent process for the inspections. The ward soups get the complaints and then they go to the buildings and they evaluate the situation and deal with it as they see best. And because there's no consistent process, there's also no consistent outcomes that are tracked and followed up on. In addition to all of that, there is no option in the mobile ticketing system. If anyone is familiar with streets and sanitation tickets, they use a mobile ticketing system that is configured to write citations for violations of the sanitation code. This ordinance has never been put into the system as an option to write a violation against. So our recommendations for the first finding is that they should configure the MET system to allow for citations to be written to these buildings. They should consistently record and monitor the outcomes of recycling inspections, and we recommend that they consider creating a proactive standardized enforcement program, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. So these are elements that we would recommend that the department consider being part of a proactive enforcement strategy, that they create and maintain a list of buildings, that they develop performance goals, such as the number of inspections they plan to perform in a year or something like that. that the inspections could be random or risk-based, random being that every building subject to the ordinance would be equally likely to be inspected. Risk-based would be that, that they target buildings where they have complaints or past issues. We recommend that they consider a standardized inspection process, meaning that, that everyone who is performing the inspections is looking for the same things, recording the same things, and that the follow-ups would be standardized as well. And we recommend that they continue to respond to complaints that come through 311. Second finding is that they do not ensure that the private haulers are submitting complete and accurate and timely annual reports. As Justin mentioned, these reports are really critical. This is the way that the department would be able to gather the data that they would need to calculate a diversion rate, or other metrics that they would decide to use to evaluate the efficacy of the program. We also discovered that the haulers are not reporting to the department as required by the ordinance when their scavenger service clients decline recycling services. That is, it's a requirement under the ordinance, and the department did not have any record of any haulers filing those reports. And they are not doing enforcement through BACP. Which is they can do fines and license renewal withholding against the haulers. Our recommendations are that they ensure that the reports are complete, accurate, and timely. Again, it's their way of gathering this information. The ordinance is written that the DSS commissioner has the authority to determine what is in those reports. So the commissioner can unilaterally decide what pieces of information they are requesting to be submitted in those reports. We recommend that they use this data to contribute to calculating a diversion rate. And we recommend that they ensure that, that the haulers are reporting to the department customers who decline recycling service. The department agreed with our recommendations. They stressed to us that implementation is going to require cross-departmental cooperation. They need to work, for example, with the Department of Law to make sure that the ticketing system is configured to write a legally enforceable citation. And they need to work with BACP on withholding license renewals for non-compliant haulers. And they would need to work with another department to come up with the population of buildings that would be subject to the ordinance. And they also, in their response, stressed that a lot of their next steps are going to be contingent on the Delta Institute study, which we just heard about. So here's our contact information, and you can, if you have more questions, want to know more. I also put the link to the full report in the chat.
Thank you. That's awesome. Killian, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin and Abby. We'll now move on to Carter O'Brien, and he will talk about his expertise in plastic. Hey, Carter.
Hi, Killian. Thank you so much.
You're
I'm
welcome.
on the screen share. Okay. Okay, I think we're there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to talk on behalf of the Chicago Recycling Coalition. The Chicago Recycling Coalition dates back to efforts to ban landfills within the city of Chicago. So we're talking about the early 80s. It was a spinoff that the Center for Neighborhood Technology created because the realization was that if we weren't going to be able to landfill the waste in the city, we better figure out a better way to reuse it, and hence the Recycling Coalition was born. I'm going to go quickly through plastic just in a more broader sense than kind of single stream recycling. So basically, microplastics, as we are hearing more and more news about, and there's more scientific studies coming out literally on a daily basis, there are human health concerns with the fact that it doesn't really ever fully break down. It gets into smaller pieces, but it's always present in the environment, essentially. So the problem with plastics in general is that they're a fossil fuel related product. So you have all of the same sort of environmental concerns working with fossil fuels, from extraction all the way through refining, consumer use, and then when it enters the natural environment as waste. And so I ask you to keep this in mind, as there was a story that broke talking about how everybody was consuming kind of the equivalent of a credit card worth of plastic a week. And so the Reuters folks, I'm just going to go real fast through this to let you see what it looks like. So every week you're going through 5 grams of plastic. Again, this is just consumption. We're not even talking about respiratory and what you might be breathing in. This is what it looks like after a month. This is what it looks like after a year. This is what it looks like after 10 years. And by the way, they did continue on with this, but I'm going to mercifully just sort of cut us all short. But this is pretty scary, I thought, and we can sort of get the picture here, right? So here is the real problem, is that science, medical science particularly, is trying to catch up to what the actual impact of all of this plastic in the environment is. And I think this is, for many of us, what is the smoking gun we were kind of waiting for. So we know the plastic has been showing up in the tap water that we drink, even filtered. We know that it's in bottled water, in fact. We know that it's in the air. They've found it floating literally above the Alps. It's in groundwater that was discovered actually in downstate Illinois as part of a paper that was done a couple of years ago. But this is the real first evidence that I've seen that shows that it's really moving through the body. It's accumulating in the body to the extent that it is now being passed onto unborn children. Well, newly born children, I should say. So they're finding evidence in the placenta. I'm not going to go into great detail with this, except to say this is, it should be a really large wake-up call for all of us. And this is the reason why, because the plastic packaging production is skyrocketing, and the plastic waste generation is mostly happening in the single-use kind of zone. So if you look at the graph that's on the bottom, this came from a science paper a couple of years ago. You can see on the front end, that's all packaging in terms of time frame, because it's largely single use. And then you can see that there's other, far more legitimate uses for plastics, where the plastic is with us for a very long time. In the challenge in terms of plastic recycling, and this is of course a hot topic for all of us, is the basic problem is that it's just cheaper to buy it new. And this is a very complicated topic that gets into how we subsidize fossil fuels as a society. And the fact that there's expense that comes with sort of sorting, separating, recycling the plastic. And, as you can see, the fossil fuel prices have been dropping. They actually were in negative territory earlier in 2020. And this is just a major problem in terms of the entire concept of recycling plastic. So we've sort of, established that the plastic is everywhere. What does that mean for us here in Chicago and in the Midwest, and kind of what can we do about it? Well, the challenge that we run into here is that we do have a different environment than what you're probably more familiar with in terms of what's happening in the Pacific Ocean. So we don't necessarily see like the sea turtles and other ocean life, with like plastic straws and things like that. But what we are seeing is that the plastic does wash into the Great Lakes. It ultimately does break down into small enough pieces that it then basically works its way through the rest of the natural and the built environment. So it's moving in through the water intake. it's moving in the air, it's moving, it's blowing like across the land. And it's largely gone, I think, a little ignored here in the Midwest relative to the coast, because we just haven't seen it quite represented the same way as sort of the shocking things that were displayed in various videos. So now I saw this in the chat. So let's, just throw out here for a quick second is the big picture question is like, should we even be pretending or trying to recycle plastic at this point? Should we perhaps just be focusing on not using it whenever possible? There was a huge expose that came out. COVID, overshadowed these things a little bit, but Frontline did this, huge 60-minute expose. I highly encourage looking at it. It's sort of like Who Killed the Electric Car? They got a plastic industry insider. And what he basically established, and they showed like memos and documentation dating all the way back to the late 70s and early 80s. And he just basically said this whole idea of putting like plastic resin numbers, which is what you see when you look at the bottom of the packaging. The idea of putting like the little recycling arrow logo around it was intentional, in the sense that it was intentionally done to deceive people. They knew all the time that there were not enough facilities, there was not enough demand, that there was really no way this stuff could be recycled. But they figured if they got people to sort of embrace the idea that it was recyclable, they shift the burden of the waste onto the consumer and they release the producer. And I think at this stage of the game, everybody is familiar with things like the terms extended producer responsibility. Well, they were evading, this producer responsibility essentially dating back a good 40 plus years. So in terms of what we do about it, well, we had a really good coalition that had been built at the beginning of 2020, and we were moving this plastic-free waters legislation through the city of Chicago. And then we also had a parallel effort that was working on the state level. And what we were really we're hoping to start with tackling was styrofoam, just getting styrofoam out of use by just essentially saying, we're just going to stop buying and allowing styrofoam. And we wanted to give sort of alternatives and, bans with time on things like single use, like flatware and things of that nature. So we've gotten, as you could probably imagine, a whole lot of pushback on all of these things. COVID froze everything. I mean, the legislatures in general were dealing with so many, much more serious problems. Most of us in the plastic advocacy sort of group decided, this is not the right time to push something, especially with the restaurants who were really the target of a lot of this. We didn't really want restaurants who were already at risk of going out of business. They were just trying to keep people employed. We figured we'll work on the advocacy efforts while we're still struggling with COVID, so that we can kind of hit the ground running as soon as things, quote, kind of get back to normal. I do have to point out, in terms of when you think about what we're up against, that almost right away, all this messaging came out talking about how sanitary plastic was, and about how, they banned reusable bags. Well, this none of this is supported by science. The science basically said, no, plastic actually absorbs absorbs the coronavirus. And so that is actually like really not the greatest thing. So plastic bad, reusables still probably better. So they're not letting us use the reusables at this point. The ban is gone. You generally have to bring it and kind of like bag everything yourself, but we are encouraging that. There is no known safety risk to this. Just be considerate, and thoughtful for the folks that are the cashiers and they're still working in very kind of stressful environments. And then the other thing that we were working on that got paused was the idea of a container deposit law for Illinois. And this is one where I just hear over and over and over again, people that come to Chicago from other states that have these, and they're like, they just can't even believe it. They're like, why don't you have like a bottle bill here? I mean, you have clearly all this problem of plastic waste, and the city's recycling rate is not good. All you have to do is look over to Michigan to see that there is a 90% success rate in terms of collecting and redeeming these bottles. And the key thing is that even though the recycling of plastic is still very much kind of like, is it actually even really happening? If you keep the plastic at least separated and clean so that it doesn't run through like a recycling facility, it does keep more of its sort of structural integrity. I did the best job I could in terms of recycling or looking for information of like, how many times can you really even recycle plastic? The general consensus at this point seems to be once or twice. So even though like scientifically it's possible you could recycle plastic 7 to 10 times, more studies and more research show that in practically speaking, this is simply not happening. And that is it for me. I hope I didn't go over my time allotment. I will hang out in the chat and everything to answer any questions that I can. And thank you everybody for taking some time to join us.
Thanks, Carter. Our next speaker is Stephanie Katsaros of Compost Focus. Please correct me if I said any names wrong.
Nope, you said it right. And I think my screen is shared. Can everyone see it? I need a yes.
Yes, you're
No.
good.
No,
No, we're
Yes.
still seeing,
recycling.
we're still seeing
Yeah, we're still
Carter's.
seeing Carter.
Got it.
Yay, now it's,
Sorry.
All right, so we're good to go?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you, whoever said yes. All right, I'll just go ahead and jump right in. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Stephanie Katsaros, and I launched Brightbeat in 2010. Fostering behavior change and environmental stewardship and social responsibility is the work that we do. If we're working with cities or corporations, large facilities, special events, it's all about, and this is what I believe, not just what I do, but that it's all about a holistic approach of linking education and engagement campaigns with operational guidance so that you're understanding how to implement and then educating it properly, but also supporting infrastructure due diligence, often starting at the end and working backwards. You know, if you want to achieve a program goal, you have to align procurement guidance and education, and it has to align with available infrastructure, as many of you, I'm sure, understand. We've worked with so many partners in the last 10 years, a lot of collaborative and innovative work, prioritizing community development. And event work has been paused, which is devastating for my friends and colleagues in the music and event world. Please think of them and go back to concerts when you can. But I have 2 projects to tell you about that we're working on now and building out for the future, and specifically related to reducing and rethinking wasted food. So the first project I'm going to talk through is the Community Compost and Food Reduction Project, which is an initiative of the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, with 38 collaborators, including 23 communities, 4 waste haulers, there's farms, community gardens, and so many partners that are working to develop a more vibrant, circular economy for managing food scraps and organic material. And the reason why I was asked to share it is based on, you know, what we're trying to do here is capture data and findings through the research. We're building marketing materials now and creating a model that can be used by other units of local government. So there's kind of 4 components or objectives to the project, and I'll walk you through them. Number 1 is demonstrating and studying the benefits of building healthy soil and growing healthy food by using finished compost on farmland and on community gardens, and then really proving the benefit of that compost use, and which helps market the final product. And this, I'm going to be geeky for a second, but look at this probe. Like, how could that not get you excited about healthy soil? You can see the kind of clay, Chicago looking soil at the bottom, and then what that moist and black fertile soil looks like. Anyway, the market development is exactly this, getting excited about those nutritious resources being maintained and strengthening the market for the composter's final product, which creates the circular economy. So really large compost sites that are serving Lake County and the Chicago region, they're not able to sell all the compost that they produce, which makes them not that excited about expanding the food scrap programs until the market improves. And that's critical to circularity. Also critical to circularity, SWELCO, the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, and its members, as part of this project, are developing model language for municipal use of compost on local roads, public works, park projects, and we'll be tracking its use over this 2-year project. Then on the community gardening front, there's just so many benefits to building community and food sovereignty with community gardens, including education and supporting access to healthier food. So this project's prioritized partnerships in environmental justice communities in Waukegan and North Chicago, including gardens managed by Eden Restoration Project and Green Youth Farm, and supported by Extension, U of I Extension Small Farm Local Foods Educator. Again, building strength around that network. And lastly is enhancing marketing and education to motivate participation. So we're trying to increase awareness of and interest in composting programs that, unlike Chicago, these programs are available to them now. I mean, I know we have a lot of wonderful bucket and block bin programs, but also a lot of these folks could have curbside. They need to understand that it exists and why they should be a part of it. Also, we're engaging businesses on the benefits and the feasibility of composting programs, creating toolkits, providing direct support to target large-scale generators implementation of waste prevention, you call it source reduction, food rescue, and composting, which this benefits all. So we kind of have to go after the big guys. Somebody has to go after them. So the second project I'm going to share is an outgrowth of interest and concerns of the Chicago Sustainability Task Force. And Brightbeat facilitates CSTF, we call it. Members include the city's largest facility operators, airports, convention center, stadiums, hospitals, museums, universities. You can see the list. A lot of facility operators and program coordinators. And what we do is collaborate and share best practices and resources, including a collectively developed set of sustainability program guidelines. And, those guidelines haven't all been implemented everywhere. I mean, we're still growing and trying to do a lot more, and we've been around 10 years. But what's pretty cool is last year, like January of last year, members expressed concern about the lack of composting infrastructure and transparency. And it led to a virtual workshop. Thank you, Carter. It was going to be hosted at the Field Museum. It ended up being virtual, but Lakeshore Recycling and Organics presented. And it became very clear that compostable plastics are really sorted out and not processed. And it generated interest for a virtual stakeholder forum that was done in partnership with the Illinois Food Scrap Coalition, focused on compostable plastics. We had local, regional, and national speakers, BioCycle Magazine, Biodegradable Packaging Institute, and so on. And between these two events, over 250 participants were involved across the value chain. The point is there's a lot of interest in this, and the critical issue is essentially bio-based compostable plastics were designed to divert food scraps and reduce use of petroleum-based plastic, like Carter was just talking about. They're not achieving their intended purpose because there's a widespread lack of acceptance at organics facilities, including most in Illinois. So point number 3, while some compost site operators are successfully processing compostables and producing a valuable end product, there's gaps in research, there's lack of discussion about how and why they're doing it. So let's do something about it. So there's a lot of engagement around this idea, planning of a regional demonstration project. It is a plastics packaging compostability demonstration. We have a growing number of Illinois compost facilities, 3 so far, but more interested in signing on to conduct on-site studies. Large generators of food scraps and compostable packaging would provide live loads in addition to tests that can be done as they exist already of the material, just samples going into a project and process. So these partners all want to work together to capture and communicate scientific findings and real world experiences to help grow the infrastructure and advance organics recycling. And I know this might seem down a rabbit hole, but the thing is that the large scale generators of food scraps, if they're delivering it, handing it out to the public, they're using a vessel. Not everyone's up to par on reuse. So right now, this is, I think, a step that needs to happen, and the outcomes we hope for are piloting use of a labeling standard that's developed nationwide, being developed now, and marketing communications to better inform not only consumers, but compost site operators on product compostability and the need for and the benefit of composting. I feel like I'm talking real fast and I apologize. But in conclusion, Lake County's circularity economy or circular economy project is going on now. And I hope in the not too distant future, plastics compostability project will be coming together and will bring communication and engagement across the value chain locally to support broader compost industry sustainability. And I don't have time to talk about it, but I wanted to briefly mention work going on now to create a community-led, coordinated, and equitable response to food rescue through shared communication and logistics. It's a collaboration between the Chicagoland Food Sovereignty Coalition, I see at least one member on this call, and the Wasted Food Action Alliance and 7 Generations Ahead. More to come on the Chicago Region Food Rescue Hub next time, or another time, but just know that food rescue is and should be very top of mind when we talk about organics. So this photo, the reason why I'm showing this is because when system scale solutions are too big to tackle, I think about how overwhelmed I was back here in 2015, looking at a sea of deadheads, 3 nights, Soldier Field, the highest attendance and beer sales in venue history. My staff of 3 was aiming to make a dent in recycling, launch back of house composting, which hadn't been done yet, and support as much food donation as possible. And we were 150% more than Soldier Field's average events. So it can be done. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we are going into what we're calling the innovators, who could have also been speakers and have been gracious to give us 2 minutes, but they'll have a time after they're speaking to talk to each other in a group for 10 to 15 minutes, and we can ask them questions. So thank you to the innovators. The first one is Erlene Howard from Collective Resources in Evanston.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for having me with you tonight.
oh wait, Arlene,
I'm sorry, that was my bad. I muted the wrong person.
Now you can hear me again?
Yes.
I'm the founder and owner of Collective Resource, and we also came on the scene in 2010, and our goal was to reduce landfill use through education and commercial composting. And we have kind of addressed across many different opportunities, events. We did Live Nation at Northerly Island for 2019 and help them reduce their landfill use tremendously. But we're best known for our orange bucket collection, our door-to-door food scrap collection for residents, and we also work with office buildings. And so and we also have municipal agreements with Evanston, Skokie, and Morton Grove to help them reduce their landfill use. And in those situations, we provide metrics. And in larger hauler situations, like when we started the program at the Merchandise Mart through the Delta Institute many years ago, obviously when we're providing businesses of that scale, it's very easy for us to provide metrics. And we've done so many back of the house situations to reduce impact from across the board, and so much education to our communities and to each and every resident. We still tip every container, hand tip every container, and so we're really on the front line with the education and very interested and involved in the compostable plastic conversation to make that a success. And and help people make decisions around if they can move into paper, 100% paper products, and how that helps in the disposable realm. I'm thrilled to hear everyone who is speaking tonight and the efforts, and I'm really excited that Chicago is looking at this, and and how we can, as a group of haulers, small and big, to really help Chicago make a difference.
Thank you. Our next speaker is from Social Ecologies, Nancy Klehm.
Hi, everyone. I'm wearing a mask because I'm traveling right now and I'm in a shared space. I usually don't wear a mask during a Zoom call from my computer. So I'm the founder and director of Social Ecologies, and social ecology, you see those words come together, and it's based on the conviction that nearly all of our present ecological problems originate in deep-seated social problems. And we really believe that these ecological problems cannot be understood, let alone solved, without a careful understanding of our existing society and the rationalities that dominate it. We seek to work on a community level. We work very directly with communities that invite us in. We instigate ecological projects using collaborative design. We do a lot of research and work on publications, which is what I'm doing here in Wilmington, North Carolina. We're working on 2 publications right now. We really try to build regenerative systems, which means once we start a project, we actually follow it through for many years to kind of help build that support through a project and support for community, and also to collect data and observations of things that are happening in the field so we can redesign, tinker things as we move through things. So we really believe in design as emergent quality. It needs to be adaptive, it needs to be resilient. So you need to be open-ended in how you design projects in order to take in information as it comes in and move with it. So over the past 14 years, our work has mostly concentrated on responding to community responses to unhealthy impacts to soil, water in their communities. And we are currently working in, like I said, Wilmington, North Carolina, Springfield, Massachusetts, Los Angeles, Western Texas, Lago Agrio, Ecuador, and of course, Chicago in a bunch of different ways. Most of these ways are in training communities in soil and water sciences, helping them to design bioremediation strategies using plants, bacteria, and fungi, working to create coherent teams that have the longevity to carry this very, very long-term work forward. So it's both ecological, but a very, very strong social component. I think that's about it. You can go on to the next person. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. You've got, some time to round table. So the next speaker is Candace Prendergast from Booth School and Feeding America.
So I don't think Candace, unless I don't think Candace is here. Candace is, he works with Feeding America and working on circular, how to distribute food, but he is also working on the distribution of vaccines. And he said that there may be a chance that he wouldn't be able to jump on if there was something to do with the vaccine So I think unless he jumps in, we'll just move ahead. Sorry
So
about that.
Joanne Rodriquez from,
Um,
I'm sorry, we're having a street issue. Joanne Rodriquez, Mycocycle. Um, I'm
Lots
excited
of
to hear
really
this one.
cool names. Killian, thanks for inviting me. I know I'm kind of the last one into this initiative. I'm also the new kid on the block. I started Mycocycle late 2018 after spending 30 years as a sustainability leader in the construction products and building materials industry. I knew 16 plus years working at a large corporate producer using petroleum-based derivatives for the basis of our materials that we couldn't get our clients to zero waste. I led sustainability efforts for them for quite a while. And so our customers like the federal government and colleges and universities, cities and municipalities just couldn't get there. And in part, there were a lot of toxins in the materials. They're very voluminous. And most importantly, and always the key to recycling is the fact that there were no end use markets. What I quickly discovered when I left that position to try to solve this issue from the outside in is that many of the construction and demolition waste streams, which are the fourth largest waste streams being landfilled today, and we have less than 15% landfill space left, contain carcinogens known as PAH, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. It comes from the partial incineration of asphalt and petroleum-based chemicals. And the only known remediator of that in nature is fungi. And so I started Mycocycle, which is a waste to resource process that uses mycoremediation to remove the toxins out of the waste, de-risking those, and also tackling POPs and phthalates, as well as presenting new bio-based reuse opportunities for the materials into manufacturing. The composites for mycelium-based, mushroom-based materials are ripe for new building products, insulation products, flooring, acoustical tile. They also create a great soil-like biomass for engineered growing media for use in on-structure vegetation, and mulch, and stormwater management. And so if I seem hurried and crazy and tired all the time, I am, because we're building all of these markets, because for all of this to work, all of it has to be there. We have to create the end use opportunity of economic value. We have to educate around the ability of mushrooms to eat trash, as we affectionately call it. And so we're hyper focused on scaling this technology in 2021 to develop containment solutions out. We're hyper focused to stay here in Chicagoland. I'm based in the western suburbs. I came through 1871 and then went to the Clean Tech Open National Accelerator out of Lacey, because 30 years in business does not mean that you know how to run a business. And so here I am, right, fresh from Startlandia to actually implementation. And we have great advisors, and I have a great science advisor too in Peter McCoy. And some of you who work in mycelium might be familiar with radical mycology and mycologos. And he is our chief mycologist and was on board from day one to try to develop out these solutions and to push this conversation forward. We really have to talk about twofold about how we create better materials moving forward that lessen our dependence on petroleum-based derivatives, as well as factor ways to remove and de-risk the toxins out of those waste streams, creating opportunities for viable reuse. And I'll leave a picture for you. 13 million tons of asphalt shingles a year is the figure we see most frequently touted around what's landfilled in terms of asphalt shingles. It's easiest to measure. That doesn't include their manufacturing and waste streams, nor does it include the commercial waste streams. The idea that we would be able to reuse all of this into asphalt paving, which is the kind of misnomer, the perception of what's happening with those materials, is false. We're only using 2 million tons into recycled asphalt paving solutions, leaving 11 million tons to sit for 400 years in landfill. That 11 million tons could fill Yankee Stadium 27 times every year. So to start to get the idea of the volume, we talk, I kind of feel like Marsha Brady, Marsha, the Brady Bunch, that we talk about the plastic bottles, and that's super important too, but we can't take our eye off of these huge and voluminous waste streams that are taking up landfills. When they're going there, they're polluting the communities. And from my perspective, innovating a technology that could be scaled and decentralized waste management to produce new biomass for reuse is key to our future. So I want to thank you guys for having me here, and hopefully I can start to lend some to the conversation, as well as draw from all of you as we start to scale in Greater Chicagoland.
Thank you. So now we're going to open it up to the roundtable with all 7 people who spoke. If you have any questions to ask them right now, while they're asking each other questions or communicating, happen. We'll take your questions as from the moderators, not as an open forum. Carter, you're always a good starter. Do you have any questions to generate this conversation?
There were so many great things here, right? I was really impressed by all this. There's so much to go from. Somebody did at some point talk about data transparency and collection, and I think one of the things we're really hoping that Delta's involvement with the city is going to bring us is at least some clarity what these waste streams are. Because I can tell you that the Recycling Coalition has been trying to get the reports that the OIG staff mentioned regarding what the haulers have to turn in. And I am still unable, based on years of issuing FOIAs, I can't tell anyone with a straight face how much plastic waste we actually produce in landfill or recycle in the city of Chicago. They just don't provide that data. So it's kind of difficult when it's challenging for me, especially when I have people that somehow find me through LinkedIn or other things, and they say, we're interested in some sort of, new innovative way to recycle plastic. They say, but we can't figure out how much plastic waste there even is to work with. And I first say, it's a lot. But then I say, it's really unfortunate we don't know. So if nothing else, what I hope we can get out of this, and I think Stephanie's project she's working on, connecting the compostable, the bioproduct compostable manufacturers with the composting site folks, it's just getting everyone on the same page and getting the data and the information more transparent so that we can make, evidence and scientifically valid kind of policy and proceed.
Where does any of you see us going now? And is there anything people can do to start working on moving the city forward, sustainability?
I mean, my opinion on this and what I see work in corporate America that maybe we don't do enough in municipal structures really to show the value stream and the business case. As much as we could talk about, land, activities related to landfilling and handling waste, emitting 30 times more harmful methane gas than CO2e, it's money talks. And so it really is about the value creation as well as the societal impact. And so if we could get more business minded in some of those metrics and start overlaying those side by side. I know working in vegetative roofing forever, when those programs stopped and we talked to, Mayor Rahm, why, and he said, well, nobody could ever quantify what the return on the investment was. And that was just a shame because the data sets were there, but it was never qualified in such a way that we could talk with these dollars and cents attached as well.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring it up. I really feel like until there disincentive to landfill food and material that can be reused, that it's going to be very hard to get anybody to do the right thing. As long as it is so cheap at the curbside to throw something away, then it's really going to be very challenging or to put in the parameters for the large producers of any type of waste But obviously I'm most interested in the food scrap.
So the IG's office, our experience has been with this report that the current city council is very engaged in the issue. We got a lot of response from them and a lot of interest. And so I think we would encourage people to engage with their elected officials. You know, I think this it's a moment when things might be possible. So we always encourage civic engagement. And you can also come to the IG's website and give us your ideas for things that we can audit in the future that might be helpful. We do tend to dig in pretty deep to these things.
Excellent. I do like the circular economy idea and the idea of having community farming that has a composting component to it, where food scraps from the neighborhood create soil and grow food within one community. It creates jobs, it creates ownership, and creates a healthy food system. You know, we're talking about that we definitely need more composting facilities to continue this work. But if we could, you know, if there are communities that have the space to make it work within their community, that is a real ideal situation for feeding people and composting.
Composters. I'm wondering where the facilities are located. I know the trash and landfill material is sent like over 100 miles away, but looking at it from like how much energy you're saving when you're not hauling things that far and where on roads, and like if we can classify some of those numerics, I'm just curious where those facilities are.
So the material that Collective Resource hauls, we take it into transfer station at 31st and California, owned by Lakeshore. And they take the material to 122nd and Stony Island to Harborview, which is, it's run by organics at this point. The processor is organics. And so it's within the city limits. It's on the southeast side at 122nd and Stony Island, where our material ends up. So it's pretty circular. You know, a portion of that comes from the North Shore. It would be great if we could get a North Suburban, somewhere closer than Midwest Organics, which is way out in McHenry. Try to get something a little closer in would be terrific. There's been some projects that have not gone all the way through that I'm still hoping may, where we could get some closer composting sites.
We do some composting on a really small scale now, because restaurants have so many have closed, or they can't afford, they're working at margins right now. So we take things, our waste to community soil centers, which are located in community gardens and community farms, that we build the compost ourselves and then make that available for free to community that surrounds the soil center.
One thing that we're kicking around is, can the city write into the property laws with big developments like Lincoln Yard that are coming in, and they're on TIF money, that they have a waste management plan, they have a recycling plan, and they have a composting closed loop. So that's one of the ideas we're trying to come up with. Dream on, is there anything, what would be an ideal situation we could have in 3 years, or any?
Hi, I just wanted to chime in. This is Justin. I'll share my video. My internet connection is kind of iffy, so I was keeping the video off. But I see that there was a comment regarding the focus being on audits of DSS's program, essentially recycling program, and really, and rather focusing on that other than kind of like the fundamental flaws with like recycling or challenges with recycling broadly. And I certainly agree with that comment. And but really, I think what our focus was to look at what what is the existing like framework and what is being done. Is it being put to use? And kind of what we found is that the enforcement capacity that does exist is not really being put to use. So we also kind of began this audit and worked through it with the knowledge that it's not enough to simply enforce what's on the books already. You know, we know that we were hoping that the report would be kind of a foot in the door to kind of get the conversation going about the idea of a more holistic, comprehensive kind of waste strategy, mitigation strategy, because if anything, the report has really highlighted kind of just how flawed our system currently is right now. So while there is, you know, there is certainly a great case to kind of focus more on like the fundamental challenges of recycling. But yeah, hopefully with the report, we're able to kind of get that conversation happening a little bit more with our elected officials to start thinking about more holistically in terms of how we deal with the city's waste.
Yeah, thanks, Justin, and thanks, Dominic, for the question. I was, I don't know if you could see my fingers going. I was trying to type a response, but really appreciate Justin kind of giving the outline of why the OIG audit is so important. And you know, the work that we're currently engaged with in the city is a separate initiative. I think, you know, both super important, but with different goals. And one of the reasons we were so excited to engage with the mayor's office and Streets and Sand on this effort is it wasn't just a request to kind of like get Blue Cart from 8% to 11% or kind of be really incremental and tiny changes on that, but was looking at materials management as a broader system, thinking about repair and reuse and food rescue, all as being part of that materials management system instead of just kind of chipping away at the problems with our system that is really just set up for disposal or kind of more complicated disposal, if you want to be cynical. But I think it's a really important question, and so glad that that was brought up.
I think it's 8:12, so we're now we're now focusing on the public's questions, and so I'm glad that Justin and Megan were both kind of addressing the same, because that is the one question, the first question that people asked is, how can the OIG's findings be actionable? How can the recommendations be put into place? Is that something that both Megan and Justin want to answer, and Abby?
Well, the department agreed with our recommendations. And so part of our process is that we do follow up with them. We try very much to make our recommendations actionable. And as I said, you can read all of this in the report. It's online. I put the link in the chat to the full report. That they responded to us. They agreed with our recommendations, and they also said that it will all dovetail with the results of the Delta Institute report. So,
Megan, do you have a response to how you then, so it's kind of going to be in your court, how do you then, or do you circle back to the OIG? How do you then ask the city to make all of your recommendations? I mean, that is a perfect circular loop right there. How do you make that actually be green?
Definitely. I think OIG's findings are going to be really informative, especially for that high density residential and commercial piece, which is not serviced by the Blue Cart, less kind of directly engaged with Streets and Sand in as far as a collection or a hauling type of perspective. So that's going to be crucial to that piece of our findings and our strategy. to be sure. I think in general, I don't know if anyone's written a planning document for a municipality or any other entity. You don't come with guarantees that your recommendations and strategies are going to be implemented, but we're really hopeful that having the mayor's office be kind of our primary partner and having that sort of central momentum and vision for this strategy will put us in a really good position to see some of these move forward because it won't be just us, Delta Institute, uninvited, saying you should do this, you should do that, even though we'd love to do that. Having that mayor's office back the report and request the report has made us very hopeful that we'll be able to see some momentum with these strategies. I don't know if that's exactly answering the question, but.
Well, the IG office also, we will do a follow-up report. It's usually at the 6-month mark after one of our audits. We follow up with the departments to see how implementation of the recommendations is going. In this instance, it might not make sense to do it at the 6-month mark based on how other things are happening. But there will be a follow-up report to report back on how the recommendations are going.
Great, and I think, Abby, you had mentioned this a little bit before, but how can community organizations and individuals help facilitate both what your reports are, the follow-up?
Well, I mean, we would say from the IG's office, we would say that people should. We hope everyone reads the report. And engages with the report with us on social media, give us your feedback, give us your questions. All of that can be done through our website, and also to engage with your elected officials. As I said, we've had a lot of interest from City Council about this, and we have their attention on this issue right now, I think.
Yeah, just to kind of, I just wanted to add kind of the piggyback off what Abby was saying is that really in terms of individual efforts or community group efforts, it's really just a matter, I think, of keeping the pressure on your public officials. That's really, I think, how most change is affected. And the more information, the more solution-oriented information you have to bring to the table and push on those elected officials, I think, is perhaps one of the best ways to go about seeing some change happen.
Great. And then thank you very much. And Carter had mentioned that there were other cities that had bottle bills, and I know Nancy has worked in many other cities. Are there any, and also Stephanie has worked in other counties. Are there other cities that we can look to or other models that we can look to that we can just say, hey, this is what they do better in other cities and municipalities for all of these issues, including composting, recycling, even upuse. So like Megan, what you talked about, to think of waste as resources. What other cities are doing it better?
I can do kind of a shameless plug that with our waste strategy, we also, as part of that scope and where several of our strategy recommendations are coming from, is a peer city analysis for different programs focused on different generators or material streams that we'll be sharing with the waste strategy. So that's looking both at sort of the gold star when it comes to waste diversion of all types, on your New York Cities, your West Coast, your Portlands. So kind of taking those as gold stars, but also looking at some of our Midwest neighbors that have more comparable economic situations. I know in the chat there was a lot of talk about the low cost relatively of landfilling in the Midwest and how that can impact a lot of the feasibility of some of these programs. So there are certainly examples in the Midwest and in Illinois that Chicago can look to as a gold star for some of those programs.
Great, and I'm just going to ask 2 more questions. And so the other question about actionable items, how can we reduce, how can we bring these to national, international issues to our state officials? maybe that's, I know the scope is Chicago.
Sorry, I was typing in the chat. I've been working directly with some large national organizations that are in waste management, but primarily directly with the EPA and CDRA, closed loop partners and other organizations that want to lessen our dependence on landfill activities, the United Nations. I mean, it's global, it's not local, but there is some trickle down, and I'm always going to go back to money talks. And that's why you see Closed Loop Fund and other organizations putting their money where their mouth is to try to enhance and fortify new innovations so we can do demonstrations and not just talk about it, right? So if I just have this great idea and we never get it implemented or scaled, it will be another one that died on the vine. You know, it's tough because a lot of these industry organizations do have the divided interest. A lot of their memberships are these large operators and, you know, Waste Management Republic, and you know, they're part of the problem in manipulation of the numbers. And so I think if we can start to really focus on the small to mid-sized processors and drive solutions around decentralized processing, I think Stephanie said decentralized composting and decentralized bioremediation, a microremediation, then we put the onus on the more localized community decision making. And it's tough until there's an actual remedy to really advocate for these things. And so there is a bit of an urgent drive, I think, from the other people speaking here to get this developed and out there. So when you start to put these implementations and the strategy and the TIF bills with these requirements, there's some actual solution or remedy for those in those areas and building in those areas.
If I can quickly piggyback, Joanne, I agree with all you said. It's interesting when we think about the need for infrastructure, but that's really putting the onus and putting the pressure on the system. And, you know, we have to, that's why I love extended producer responsibility, you know, and consumer acceptance of I'm the problem, I need to fix it. You know, the US Plastics Pact is part of an international pact, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is leading. And actually the proposal that we did, the compostable plastics demonstration project for, we created the project to present it in hopes they would support and fund this pilot project here. So there's a need for the brands and the makers of this stuff to do something about it. And then the consumers. You know, we can all do an audit. We can all look in a dumpster or look in our alley and say, Stephanie made a mistake and that the education's the problem. You know, but at the same time, the consumer might just be being lazy as well. Like we all have to, I sort of feel like take on a little bit more responsibility. This is my personal opinion. And so I do think we have to like build simultaneous the infrastructure, the extended producer responsibility approaches, and then also really consider the onus on the consumers themselves to find a way to lessen what we're generating.
I want to talk about scalability is always seen as this vertical thing and massive. And it's also, scalability is on a very horizontal scale. Many nodes of many nodes, which has come up a couple times, but is come up in ideas of with marketplace, but decentralized nodes, people understanding that they actually are located in communities, they know their neighbors. It's not about individual consumers, it's about communities of citizens is really important. So not taking a personal onus, but understand that together in more connected bodies, we can make things happen. So I really believe in the horizontal scaling.
So that's absolutely beautiful way to kind of summarize, unless anyone else has a horizontal scalability, unless anyone else has any comments that they would like to make before we've got just 5 minutes. I also want to say to what Nancy said and what about economics too. And I'm sorry that Candace didn't come because he is looking at how to make economic models viable and to show people how we can actually, it's distribution problems, rather than production problems. And if we can get distribution to be economically feasible, we can move things around and be more sharing rather than more taking and more dumping. So does anyone else have any more comments that they would like to make to the group of presenters, innovators? On that note, I guess I'm going to ask, Killian and I are going to thank you all for joining us this evening. This has been fascinating. We'll also share the presentation as well as the chat, because like everyone has been saying, it takes a community, and there is amazing community, not just the amazing presenters and innovators, but also the audience of all, bringing their collective wisdom together. So are you here with me, Killian?
I am. And one thing that we're doing this Saturday, we have a litter day once a month at the end of the month on Saturdays, where everybody gets out and picks up all the garbage without thinking more than being a good citizen. But this week we found an end user for those holiday Christmas lights. So at Rewired Restaurant on Thorndale and Winthrop, we're kicking off collecting your holiday wires lighting. So you'll have more room in your basement, and you'll finally be able to get those lights thrown out that are been around for 10 years. So I hope you'll join us one of these Saturdays.
So that goes back to Megan's idea of really a collective paradigm shift of really thinking of waste as resource and how we can reuse things and use things in a regenerative circular way rather than throwing things out. So I just want to thank with Killian and also Renee, who's part of EES, well, we're now EC, and Maddie and Nathan, who've helped organize this. I want to thank all of the, or we want to thank all of the presenters. Megan from Delta Institute, a big round. I wish I had like a laugh or a clapping track. Abby and Justin, Abby Sullivan and Justin from the IGO. Carter O'Brien from the Field Museum, as well as the sustainability, I forget the big long name. And then Stephanie Katsaros from Brightbeat, and then Erlene Howard and Nancy Klehm and Joanne Rodriquez, all who are doing amazing, amazing work. And we really appreciate everyone sharing their time and sharing their wisdom and giving us a nudge as to what we can really do all together. And we will be hosting, Renee's posted to the chat that this is the first. So thank you all through this generous grant from ELP, we've been able to bring you guys together. And this is the first of 4 town halls. So thank you for raising the bar and kicking off such amazing ways of rethinking our shit and helping us get it all together. So we can blossom into beauty. We can have it all go into beautiful gardens and really be doing interesting things together. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
You can go eat your ice cream.
See, I like your new name.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.